Right, good afternoon, councillors. Welcome to the council meeting of today. Just remind councillors, please, that while this is on Zoom, it is also being live streamed. So, and as you've just heard, we are recording as well. So thank you and welcome to everybody watching and online. We have had the council prayer this morning with another council meeting, so that would normally be part of our system. We are obviously in COVID, so the need to meet in Zoom means that we have a limited number of people in chambers. And I have Carol Gordon here providing technical support. I have Mr. Dave Toombs, Finance, and Mr. Arno Benetti in terms of assets. I acknowledge we have our Chief Executive, Peter Beggs, online. There are a number of staff that will be zoomed in or are currently being zoomed in, and they're remaining hidden at the moment. Is that correct? In terms of asking questions today, please raise your hand. We have got a gallery profile in front of me, so I can keep track on that. Are there any questions around process? No? Great, I'll skip straight in. In terms of apologies, I've had an apology from Councillor Rakawa, and I will move that apology be accepted. A seconder to that, please. Thank you. Councillor Hira seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. We have no public forum today. That is something that would be very difficult for us to have and be able to maintain social distancing within chambers. So an apology that we don't have that option really easily available to us. In terms of the reminders of interest declarations, councillors, are there any councillors wishing to declare an interest at this stage? Councillor Hira? You're on mute, councillor.
Can I just declare an interest in potentially a deliberation recommendation that's been put forward on behalf of Mokai Party Services, as I'm the General Manager of that organisation?
Thank you very much. We will note that, and if you remind me when it comes to into play. Any further conflicts of interest declarations at this stage? No, thank you. I'll move on. In terms of confirmation of the order of business, I haven't received any changes. We will have a council public excluded session with the close of the normal council meeting. From staff, Peter, anything further from you? Thank you. In terms of, that moves us on to the follow-up actions from previous meetings. Sorry. Confirmation of minutes, the confirmation of council minutes, and they're pages 7 through to 12. I'll be looking for somebody to move them either with or without amendment. However, bearing in mind this was a council meeting that I was away on further council business, so I'll take direction a little bit from the chair of that meeting, Councillor Nigel Belsham. Any amendments that councillors would wish to take? Or do you want me to run through that page by page? No? Would somebody be
move them as a true and correct record?
Looking for a seconder to that? Thank you, Councillor Carter seconding, Councillor Belsham moving. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. In terms of the follow-up from other meetings, Gordon, do you wish to raise anything there, or who's going to take us through that?
I think There's a number of staff that have some actions, so if there's any specific questions, we'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you. I'm just scrolling through on my tablets. So those actions are recorded on
2021.
page 21. Are there any follow-up? Councillor Carter.
With the one regarding staff email the Bulls Domain Upgrade Volunteer Group, can I please be in on that correspondence?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. The answer to that, Mr. Benedict says yes, that's not a problem.
Thank you.
Any further ones? So there are a number of closed items in that list. No, would somebody then like to move the receipt of that? Thank you, Councillor Hero moving, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Carter seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. The Mayor's report is fairly extensive. This is item 8.1, and I'm certainly not going to go right through that, but I have some other things that I wish to add to my report, and you'll have to bear with me a little bit because they are significant. So the update of Entity B, Three Waters, Hui and Taupo. Since then, I was asked to be one of the 6 mayors to work with the chief executives, noting that our chief executive, Peter, is also in this group, and iwi to take suggestions back to government. I would note quite strongly that this does not take away our right as a council to engage with government, something that, in my opinion, we must do as a council. And this aggregation of mayors and chief executives giving feedback from Entity B, this is about if aggregation happens, which may well be mandated or legislated by government, what would best practice look like? So this in no way illustrates our decision to opt out or to stay in. We would still reserve our right to decide on that. When I note that the time frame for engagement with government was 8 weeks, we're now down to 5 weeks. I also note that it's illegal for us to consult with communities in this time frame, and that's the basis of information that we have from government. Essentially, their view is that we don't have all of the information. It would be unfair for us to do that. However, that does not limit us from putting information into the public arena, and council will have that option. And I think that you will see, for those screening in, you will see information being placed on our websites, etc. And certainly post that 8 weeks, the indications are that we will be able to consult, and it's something that I believe as a council we should do fairly heavily to seek advice as to what our decision should be. And the last addition to my report is I would like to congratulate the Rangitikei River Catchment Collective, and in particular Roger Dalrymple and all of the other individuals and catchment groups involved. We lead the country with this initiative, and it's probably something I should have included in my report earlier. Look, on that basis, I'm happy to take any questions around this or my tabled report or mayor's engagements. Councillors, Councillor Ash. You'll have to unmute yourself, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks for the report. It's a great report. I was just wondering if it's possible to maybe request an undertaking, if you haven't already done so, which you probably have, but a letter from council to Mr. Rankin for the work that he's undertaken. It's been considerable, and I think being able to celebrate that and acknowledge him would be fantastic from a council perspective.
Yes, that is being undertaken as an action, and I've obviously spent some time with Mr. Rankin. Fully endorse your sentiments. He's given the best part of the last few years on this work, and there will be a process in which there is an unveiling in effect. Yeah, thank you for that, though. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, referring to your Mayor's report, Bishop, I'd just like to say on the bottom of page 22, where you mention the Hotapu River Park in Taihape, I have been charged with also thanking the council for their input on that particular day. They had quite a high presence, contributed a barbecue and beautiful sausages donated by His Worship. Thank you very much. And everyone was very happy about the day. Also in that, I do have a question around how successful the consultation was on naming of the amenities block. It'd be really nice to know how that went.
I don't have the answer to the second question. Perhaps, Arno, could you update us?
I can, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we had a limited contribution to the naming of the building. So I think in total we only received 2 or 3 possible options. But of the 2 or 3, some of them are really good and will be presented to council at a later stage.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I also made comment in one of the earlier reports that I think was noted in the last council agenda that we needed to check on where the land came from as to whether it was donated, because if it was donated in any shape or form, that may be part of the consideration in terms of naming. And I see that that was an action as listed as ongoing. And just make another comment around the work done at Papakai, a huge local turnout, as I said, about 70 odd people. Hugh Stewart, I will also acknowledge, he was one of many people there, but I know Hugh has engaged on a number of reserves. He seems to be almost the patriarch of pest control and monitoring through a number of our reserves right throughout the district, and I absolutely commend him. He's another Joe Byford person, isn't he? Any further questions of my report? Councillor Carter, question?
Question no, but I'd move that your written and verbal report be received.
Thank you. I'm happy for you to move my report. Maybe I'll second it. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? The report is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on. By the way, I notice staff must not have a lot of confidence in council because we've booked this Zoom call for till 9 o'clock tonight. So I'm hoping that we don't go anywhere near that. Thank you. I'll move to the Chief Executive's report. This is starting page 26, and I'll pass to our Chief Executive, Peter Beggs. Peter.
Sorry, Your Worship. I'll take the report as read, but still go through the points just in case there are questions. I'm happy to have Sharon talk more on the health and safety dashboard if an elected member wishes.
Questions of the report, councillors? Peter, I'll just raise one issue. within your report, you talk about a barbecue requirement.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'll get to that. I was just going point by point.
Okay,
just
thank you.
But I will get to that, yes.
All right. So are there any questions around the health and safety dashboard? No. Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The engagement and consultation schedule is attached. The point 3, the request for the Bulls traffic mirror, it's not within our jurisdiction to be able to do that. And so there was a resolution, but we are unable to fulfill. And so this point advises elected members that we are unable to fulfill that resolution.
Okay. Thank you. A question, Councillor Carter?
There was, I talked to Mr. Bernardo about it regarding yellow lines, if they could be investigated to have that intersection cleared of vehicles so people can get out there with no problems. As the week that he went down and investigated it, there was actually 2 incidences involving that intersection.
Can we leave that as sitting with staff? Jan, are you happy with that?
I am, thank you, Your Worship. I think we should just record that as an action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just for Ash's benefit, and we get this right, and forgive me, Your Worship, I do like to pause in these moments where we're asked to take actions and in undertakings that we get them absolutely correct. So with your blessing, we'll just note that down if Councillor Carter could repeat exactly what he wishes us to do.
Investigate having yellow broken lines for no parking either side of the intersection to inhibit vehicles from parking that area.
And the intersection being Holland Crescent and Bridge Street.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll consider you now blessed, Peter, if you'd like to carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's an absence from an intervention from Ash, we'll continue. So I'll presume, Ash, you've captured that, or Carol, for that matter. Point 4 is advising of, and it was following our request, Your Worship, that you wished for me to share this with elected members, the purchase of a barbecue, and I know you had a question.
Yes, so my question is, the report doesn't come with a recommendation. There are a number of recommendations at the bottom of the report. So presumably you, in accepting the report, this would be approved, but I see that it comes with no cost estimate. Have you got any information that you can provide?
So on both, on your first point, it didn't come with a recommendation. As an operational expenditure, I didn't believe it would require a approval from elected members. If you wish for that to take place, then I'm happy to insert a recommendation in there. But the same way I don't come to you for other items of vehicles or whatever, I classify that in the same regard. Regarding the price, the towable trailer, etc., was around 15,000.
Any follow-up questions from councillors? Councillor Dalgety.
Would you envision this barbecue being available for fundraisers and things like that, or not at this stage?
Well, there are other trailers and towable barbecues. The predominant requirement for it is that we currently have staff barbecues, and we find them an exceptional way of integrating with our staff together. In the way in which we transport the current barbecues is unsafe, and it's not a particular activity I wish to see continued in the way we've been doing it. The safest way of doing it is indeed the way in which is outlined in the solution in this point in the paper. The second thing is that it would be a cooking facility for any pop-up emergency operations centre that we might have and might need. So it doubles as that. the point you raised regarding the potential use for the community, I'm aware there are other avenues for community use through various schools and other businesses. I wouldn't want to compete with those businesses or charities, but I would certainly consider it if elected members wish for us to do that.
Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Mr. Biggs for the information, because that's all I saw it as. And I can only applaud the fact that he's looking after the staff, and it just happens to also be a civil defence bonus. So thank you very much. I didn't really expect anything more on that.
Cool, we've got a forest of hands. I'll go Councillor Hira, then Councillor Carter. Councillor Hira.
So just to tautoko what Jill has just said and support her kōrero, I just wanted to acknowledge and Jill did say that Councillor Duncan had said the support that the council had given during the recent planting down at Papakai Park, and so trudging around that barbecue is a big undertaking. So I think it's a good thing, and it's a future thing that's not just going to be used once. I'm sure. I'm sure that's going to be able to be used many times. So, ka pai.
Councillor Carter.
To Mr. Biggs, are you modelling off any particular model of what you're looking at doing?
No.
I suggest you have a look at St John's Wanganui.
All right, I think we're absolutely delving down to an operational matter here. Councillor Ash.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I'll reserve my thought on it. It was just a thought that absolutely love the idea of having a movable barbecue that can go through the district and look after the staff and be available for civil defence. Obviously, in favour of that, but I do find it interesting that having just come out of finance committee where we're looking at savings, etc., that things like expenses like this aren't at least advised to us, so that we're aware of them. At least, just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item number 5, the Marton Arts and Crafts Centre. Peter, back with you.
Yes, this is a request for a waiver and recommendation 2 and appendix 3 or attachment 3 refers.
Yeah. Look, what I might do is deal with some of these recommendations now. So could somebody please move the recommendation 1 that the Chief Executive's report be received? Councillor Belsham moving, Councillor Ash seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. And the item you're talking about is effectively recommendation 2, that council approves or does not approve the request from Marton Arts and Crafts Centre for waiving 100% of the cost of the building consent fee, which is $772. Peter, are you happy if we move straight to a recommendation there?
Yes, please, Your Worship.
Councillors looking for someone to move one way or the other here. Councillor Ash, recommendation. Wishing to move? Yeah,
no, happy to move that we do support it 100%. I've lost my page again. But yeah, so that council does approve the request, please. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Dalgety seconding. Councillor Ash, do you wish to speak to the motion? I think it's fairly evident we've got a lot of precedents for this and supporting such an awesome little organisation doing the great work that they do, but the precedent's already there, and I would expect this is an easy support. Just before I go to Councillor Gordon, I will just make a note in the minutes, in the information around this,
around previous fee waivers. An example was given, for instance, to ward furniture. I think in defence of ward furniture, because people will question as to why a commercial concern gets a waiver. So the waiver here was under economic development in terms of earthquake-prone strengthening work, which is available to any commercial operation. So I almost say it's a little bit of a pity that they've been named, because people will get a wrong perception there. Councillor Gordon.
My query was around the fact that this is only the council internal part of the fee, doesn't include external charges.
Thank you. Any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Ash, do you want to write a reply? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move to point 6, the Bulls and Districts Historical Society. The Society, we're going to present one of our 2 presenters today at public forum, and as His Worship mentioned, that's not allowed in level 4. The attachment is the letter that has been written to me by the Society. They are asking us to the use of the old Bulls library for a peppercorn rental. They have outlined in the attachment the cost that they would cover under such arrangement. They would also wish for that site to be used for the proposed Chris Amon statue that elected members have previously received a public forum presentation on. The recommendation is for your approval for in recommendation 3 sorry, I'm rereading the recommendation. I know that's quite explicit. It could be alternative to that, that I move to negotiate further with the Bulls and Districts Historical Society regarding that, and to be quite explicit on costs.
Are you wishing time to reconfigure that recommendation? This recommendation has been driven from staff, but while you're thinking about that, a couple of questions from me. So it is a single-storey building. Has that been, does it have a classification under earthquake-prone legislation?
I don't know the answer to that, Your Worship, I'm sorry.
Okay, but the letter that information you've got, would the Bulls and District Historical Society be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the building while they have a lease?
Yes.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Gordon, then I'll go Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gordon.
A question for me. I know that there's a historic frontage to that building with respect to a war memorial or something similar, but was the rest of that site one of the sites that we potentially had earmarked for sale with regard to cost recovery for Te Matapihi?
Sorry.
Peter, do you want to answer that?
You can, Your Worship.
Okay. So it was one of a number of buildings that we no longer needed, but it wasn't identified to my knowledge in the list of buildings that we were going to put up for sale, because there was always the question around community use and historic nature. To some extent, and I'm not speaking to the motion here, but to some extent, this would resolve some of that, the questioning that's in the community.
Thank you. Question answered.
Councillor Wilson next, and then Councillor Belsham, I think. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, similar question to Councillor Gordon, and I think you may have clarified it, but my question to Mr. Beggs is, have you reviewed previous decisions that have been made? There was some recommendations made with regarding to this this particular building, and I would just be checking to see what those recommendations were moved and passed. That was possibly in the last triennium. Might be worthwhile just doing a little bit of follow-up before you go any further.
I think the only recommendation, Councillor Wilson, was not to put it up for sale.
Just for clarification, there was a conversation regarding the arch being the memorial and not the actual building itself. So there was some detailed discussion around it, Your Worship, and I would just seek to see if there wasn't any recommendations that actually came out of that before we perhaps moved into a recommendation later here today that might supersede one that's already been done, or may be a contradiction.
Yes, and you're quite right. We should do that checking. Councillor Belsham.
No, I was clarifying whether it was a building that was identified for sale to support the build of Tamatapiki.
Councillor Ash, and I'll go back to the Chief Executive. Councillor Ash, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. I would be quite happy to see this just sit on the table for a bit longer until we had a bit more information. I'd be keen to hear, obviously they were meant to be in public forum today, so I would actually be really keen to hear what their bigger picture is for this. This is obviously a strategic building within the district, within the community itself. So I'd be keen to hear what their vision is for it, but I'd also be really keen to hear from the community, to see what the engagement has been within the community as to, is that what the community actually wants for that particular building before we go ahead and sign up for 99 years. But
okay, we might reserve that conversation to when we're speaking to a motion. The Chief Executive and Councillor Duncan. Peter.
Yeah, firstly, the motion or the recommendation there for a motion was originally made on the premise that you would have received by now the public forum presentation where a lot of those questions would likely to have been asked and answered. I do wonder if elected members would wish to change that, Your Worship, to ask me to investigate further and report back. And I would be happy if Councillor Ash's proposal went through to involve any consultation that you may require.
Councillor Ash, are you foreshadowing a motion that this lay on the table?
yes, please.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan. Right.
I had a question around, I feel like I've missed out a couple of steps here, and directing a statue of Chris Amon. I thought that Chris Amon's statue was going in the green space at Tamatapiki. Is that not happening?
I'll let the Chief Executive reply to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, Councillor, we have made an undertaking to Ngāti Para Wahawaha to deliver the artwork for the green space in the Tamatapiki. The Bulls Historical Society, or the group representing the Chris Amon statue, did meet with me, and they've met with Ngāti Para Wahawaha. And what I've explained to them is that we have an agreement with Ngāti Para Wahawaha to deliver the artwork, and only after that's been implemented would I take to elected members the ability for other art installations in that green space area. And so now this is has moved on a bit. That green space artwork will be starting in the summer. And so where we're at now is an alternative space for that Chris Amon statue.
Thank you. Councillor Ash, I gave you incorrect advice, suggesting that you're going to foreshadow a motion. We don't actually have a motion on the table at all. So, if you wish to move in that direction, you'd absolutely have that right, because we're not discussing a motion that is on the table. So, Councillor Panapa.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the council that myself, Councillor Carter and Councillor Raukawa had a Zoom meeting with Paul Sharland on, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. where he wanted to give us a preview of the presentation that he was hoping to give to us today. And it was very positive in terms of what their aspirations are for that building. They're doing their due diligence and research into earthquake information, and some good advice was given by Councillor Carter in terms of researching the war memorial aspect of that that building. But it was very encouraging to see a positive effort from the community within Bulls to honour those who have played a significant part in the history of that area. So and it's I don't think there's any urgency in this. It was really, first of all, seeking whether the council had any plans for the building one way or the other, and just signalling that they were keen to utilise this building and make specific sort of recognition of the war memorial. And there was a lot of conversation around how this speaks to our desire to have people stop in our region, and this could be a draw card for tourism and other things as well. So by and large, it was very positive. By the way, I don't think it was a good thing having a brown hand on a brown door. So, sorry about that. Okay, Councillor Carter, if you've got anything to add to that, would be great.
Just in terms of process, councillors, and just aware of some time here, I really are looking for someone to put a motion on the floor for discussion. And as I see it, you have three options here. One is that you approve or you don't approve, and the third option being that you let this lie on the table. So it'd be useful if we are speaking to a motion. But Councillor Carter, since you're Southern Ward, I'll let you have speak to that if you desire first.
Thank you. The group would love to make use of the building, but as there are concerns regarding previous motions made in the other trienniums, whether we're overruling something that Councillor Wilson brought up, I think we should go with what Councillor Ash was trying to head toward.
I'll go to you, Councillor Ash. Are you prepared to move a motion?
Yes, please. I'd like to move that we let this lie on the table until such time as we've got a bit more information, and we've been able to have the Bulls and District Museum have a public forum with us.
So not wanting to put words into your mouth, but I presume you're saying that with respect to the request from the Bulls and District Historical Society to lease the old Bulls Library for $1 a year for the next 99 years, etc., that you are moving that this item lies on the table.
Yes, thank you.
Which would mean that it would need to be decided per routine at the next council meeting, unless there's a reason for not to do so under standing orders. So you're prepared to move that? Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter seconding it. You wish to speak to the motion?
I think we've spoken to this quite a bit already. We have an understanding of what's needed to push this forward, and yeah, looking forward to your support. Cheers.
Looking for speakers to the motion. I've got Councillor Gordon. Councillor Gordon.
It's a question from me, Your Worship. Given that we're sitting in this COVID space, is a 1 month period sufficient for the Chief Executive and his staff to have the negotiations and discussions that they need to?
They would need to come back to us if they needed an extension of time. It's just when you say it lies on the table for the next meeting, it's effectively a placeholder. The Chief Executive, do you wish to make comment?
Only in support of what you've said, Your Worship. we would bring the next or the analysis that we would undertake in this coming period would be to further more information to you for the next council meeting. Is what you may decide after that with regards to consultation, which would require more time.
Further speakers to the motion? I'll speak to the motion, whereas I'm prepared to support it to give them the opportunity to present. There's a large part of me that would have probably preferred just to say, I agree with this in principle, but I will support the motion. Any other speakers? Right of reply, Councillor? No, put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on.
So thank you, Your Worship. My final point is, I believe, the point that Councillor Hiro has declared a conflict, and that's the application for a concession to hire the Cocker Street Hall in Taihape, and recommendation 4 refers.
This is recommendation as 4. And thank you, and thank you for the declaration, Councillor Hira. Councillor Duncan, is this a question, or are you moving?
I'd like to move, please.
Go ahead.
I would like to move that council, in considering the concession application from Mokai Party Services for usage of the Kokako Street Hall, agrees to reduce the hireage fee to 0. I have quite a lot of knowledge around what they do there, and I fully support this.
Just for those online, so Councillor Hira has declared an interest. I have no issue with Councillor Hira being available to answer any questions that arise with regard to this matter. I don't see this as a pecuniary interest where she would need to be removed from the discussion. Is there any councillor that takes any objection to my ruling? No, thank you very much. So you're moving that the hireage fee be moved to 0, looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Gordon, you're seconding. Chief Executive, Mr. Biggs.
Sorry, Your Worship. I wonder if the motion may actually have a time period attached to it. The application from Mokai Party Services requests that it's on the because of the COVID-19 vaccination rollout. Perhaps it could be time bound until that is finished.
I thought it was you that wrote the recommendation, so I'll go ahead with whatever you're putting in, subject to the mover and seconder agreeing. So what words are you wanting in there?
For the after Kokako Street Hall, insert the words for the duration of COVID-19 vaccination rollout, utilises, just looking at the exact hall they're currently using. Hospital, yeah.
I'll ask Councillor Hira, does that place a limitation on what you're needing to do?
No, that does not. Thank you for that. No, I would say it doesn't place a limitation, but the reality is that we don't know ourselves how long this could be for. Yeah, so I can't, if someone was to ask, well, how long could it be for? We actually don't know. And potentially, I'd just like to say that in future, there could be something else that comes into council in future, is the Taihape Hospital itself, and the use of it could potentially be taken right off the table. But I'm not sure at the moment. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Thank you, Councillor Ash.
Yeah, thanks. Mine, sorry, just a couple of questions. One was whether it was bound in a time thing at all, but also some clarity around if it's just for the periods of those activities, or whether or not it's hiring it for exclusive use over however long. So is it exclusive use, or is it just when they're doing the sit and be fit, etc.? Thank you.
The Chief Executive may be able to answer that.
Yes, the actual application on page 34 does specify the start and finish times.
Thank you.
And that's weekly.
Look, I suspect, councillors, that there may not be anybody against this, and as such, I would like us to move on reasonably quickly. So we do have a mover and a seconder on the floor. Councillor Duncan, do you wish to speak to it as mover?
I just, as long as everyone understands that this is, you know, a great service that's supplied to the community, and because of COVID, they've not been able to use. It's basically a free facility, and it's basically the sort of thing that councils are here for, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion? There being none, so we won't move to right or reply. I'll put it straight to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. I would like to move from the chair a recommendation 5 that council commends and recognises both Mokai Pātea and Ngā Waiariki Ngāti Apa for their contribution to the vaccination program and assistance with COVID. I'll move that. I'll speak to it if we get a seconder to it. Councillor Duncan, you seconding?
Thank you.
So speaking to this, in terms of the vaccinations and help with people under COVID situation, both Ngāti Apa and Mokai Pātea have taken a very significant role. We have an apology from Councillor Coral Rokawa today, and I think that apology is connected to this ongoing work. We don't directly fund them for this work. They do it as a community assistance available to everybody within our district, and I think it's appropriate that we recognise that and commend them for it. Any speakers to the motion? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. That moves us on. Oh, sorry, Peter. Further things in your report?
That's all, Your Worship. Thank you.
Righto, thank you. Moving on to the reports for decision. 10.1, the representation review and adoption of the initial proposal. Can I ask staff who is going to take us through this?
So, Your Worship, Katrina Gray is online, and she'll spend a bit of time just talking through the process from now. Also, if there's been any change to consultation because of the COVID situation, and then she'll be happy to take questions, but we'll pass it over to Katrina.
Thank you, Katrina. We welcome you to Chambers if you'd like to take us through.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors. The report that you've got in front of you provides you the information for which to adopt your initial proposal for the 2021 representation review for public consultation. I'll take the report largely as read, but I will highlight a few matters for consideration. The representation review was triggered as a response to a council decision to adopt Māori wards for the district. And I do want to highlight, it is highlighted in the report, that while council has decided to adopt Māori wards, this doesn't take away the need for our Te Raupu Ahika committee, and there's been quite strong support from the start to retain that committee. So there is every intention to retain that committee. Elected members have been involved in a number of workshops that have led to the 4 options that are presented to you today to make a decision under. There are 4 different scenarios, 2 of which have 3 general wards, 2 of which have 2 general wards. All of the 4 options have the same 2 Māori ward structure. This is the option that our Te Raupu Ahika committee and our Ratana Community Board recommended to council to be the basis for the Māori wards. I will note that during the consultation period, we would look to seek some guidance from our Te Raupu Ahika committee on appropriate naming of the wards. As you can see currently, the wards are named Northern and Southern. There might be a bit of confusion with the general wards as well, and due to timeframes, we weren't able to have that engagement to date. So we would look to do that during the engagement period. It's also noted that even though we're in our COVID lockdown, the timeframes to complete the representation review haven't changed. So they remain the same. So we do intend to go forward with the proposed consultation as outlined in the report, and do this regardless of the alert level, wherever that ends up. You will note in section 7, we're looking for guidance from elected members on whether council wants to delegate to the Policy Planning Committee the hearing of submissions or schedule an additional council meeting. This is because of the timeframes between the close of submissions and the requirement for council to adopt the final proposal being only 6 weeks. So that means we need to conduct those hearings rather rapidly. You will note the next item, the food bylaw, is proposed to have the same consultation period, and there is also a decision there for council around the hearing of any submissions that come in on that item. The final thing I want to note is that there is an error in the report that I want to point out to you. We have amended the recommendation that had the error. There was a reference to the Tai Happy ward, which was a hangover from our last representation review. So that has been changed to make sure that's correct. I'm happy to answer any questions that elected members might have on any of the information provided in the report or the subsequent process. It is noted that this is adopting a proposal for consultation only. Council will then hear submissions and then decide on a final proposal.
A couple of questions from me and some possible direction to council. The first is, as I understand it, council would need to make a recommendation on its preferred option today, and that as part of the consultation supporting data, the other options that were considered could become part of that data. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You would decide on your initial proposal, but the other options considered and other discussion documents you've received throughout the process we would publish as supporting information to that consultation.
And we would also need to make a decision around the adoption of the community board position.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. The way I've structured the report based on feedback from the workshops is that elected members were supportive of retaining the Ratana and Taihape community boards in their current form. So that's how the recommendations have been drafted in front of you. But as always, there are alternative options if you wanted to go with a different solution for those boards.
Thank you. And the first one would be some advice to councillors. You've Katrina, you've made some comment around the engagement with iwi and the function of Te Rupiai Ka. From the chair, I consider it would be appropriate if a councillor was wanting to move a recommendation to carry that view forward in terms of the principal engagement with iwi would continue to still sit with Te Rupiai Ka. I'll let councillors think about that one during this session. But would there be any technical difficulty with us having that as a position?
Some advice from me, Your Worship, is that the establishment of that committee is a council decision, and if you wanted to signal the intention to retain that committee, that you would be able to make that recommendation today, but just noting that it is a formal decision of council in terms of establishment and disestablishment of that committee.
Thank you. It would be separate. I understand it would be separate to this report, but councillors may wish to consider that. In terms of the recommendations, and if we could scroll to those recommendations, the first recommendation is that we accept that the reception of the report, representation review report. Looking for a mover to that. Councillor Gordon, Councillor Belsham. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. We then move into the recommendation 2 that the council has the following arrangements as its initial proposal for the 2021 representation review of the district. I'll deal with these. I think we could possibly deal with these first 2 with regards to the community board as a block. And we'll deal with just the community board section of this. With your permission, Ms. Gray, could I separate that out?
Yes, you're welcome to separate that out. Just note that they do run together, forming the whole recommendation. Correct.
Is there somebody that is prepared to move for the retention of the Ratana and Taihape community boards? Councillor Panapa is moving, seconded by Councillor Ash. Councillor Panapa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Just to say that Ratana in particular, and I'm sure the same with Taihape, has a long history of engagement with council through its community board. And it's something that the community as a whole values immensely, and it definitely gives that feeling that we have a voice at the table from our communities. So I think it's important to retain them.
Speakers to the motion? Look, okay, the Councillor Dalgety.
I just feel it's a valuable avenue for our ratepayers to have a voice, and so I'm keen to encourage it.
Any speakers against this? Councillor Panapa, do you wish to write a reply?
No, that's all good, thank you.
Right, I'll put that part to a vote, and it will become part of the overall, but it's useful to be able to differentiate them, I think. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Now we come to the tricky ones in terms of the options around A, B, C or D. I will be looking for someone to move an option. However, I'll take questions around the options and the reports initially. First of all, are there any questions around process or questions around individual parts of the options A, B, C or D? No. All right. I mean, this could well end up with a straw vote or poll, but essentially let's see where we get to. Is there any councillor that wishes to move a particular option? Councillor Carter, you wishing to move what?
I'm in favour of option B.
Option B?
I wish to move option B.
All right. Have we got a seconder to option B? So Councillor Gordon, and you wish to speak to it, Councillor Carter, sorry, I was trying to think of your name for a second.
Yeah, I'm on the picture. It is very similar to what we have at the present, the three regions, the northern, central and southern. We have the 11 councillors, being 2 of them from the Maori wards that join in. So I feel that a full representation of the area with the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned, which puts the load of representation to all the members, because you're all roughly around the 1450 mark for population per councillor in that respect. So that's just sharing the load and keeping with what we have at the present.
So that would move us to a council of a total council of 13 plus the mayor.
No.
Councillor Lambert, you had your hand up. Was it for a question or were you wishing to second?
Well, I was going to second it, but yeah, I agree with Councillor Carter. I'll speak to the motion. I think with the geographical size of our area, of our region, just for the legwork, certainly in the rural areas, the more councillors, the better. I think we're not underworked as councillors because of that reason, especially in the rural areas. You know, if you want to address a problem, you quite often have to drive to it, travel considerably. So the more sort of feet on the ground, the better. That's why I support option B.
Just make it's 11, not 13.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, sorry. The district, sorry, I apologise. The district total would be 11.
Plus the mayor.
Plus what?
Plus the mayor.
Plus the mayor, 12. My apologies, councillors.
11.
Councillor Gordon?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Look, I'm fully in support of option B. It, as is previously said by Councillors Carter and Lambert, it does give us a geographic spread of our potential pool of councillors. The one great thing we have about our council is diversity. You know, I'd like to say we tick almost all the boxes, and I think we need to keep that diversity of our councillors to the fore. I think this is the option that gives us the best chance of achieving that, both through ethnicity, gender, geographic spread, or anything else that you might want to wish for. So.
Thank you, councillors. What I'm going to do now is waive standing orders to allow everybody to be able to have a say. Go to Councillor Belsham, then Councillor Hira. Councillor Belsham.
Thank you. Just in support of this motion, as the previous speakers have said, it gives a good support across the whole district and representation across the whole district, but also keeping those 3 wards pretty much intact how we've structured them previously. There's some slight amendments around the southern and central ward. It still brings the communities of interest to the areas, to those wards that they relate to, and I think that's the important thing. We spent a lot of time on this in our previous representation review, and I think it will be pretty tough to go and throw that out after the amount of work that was done not that long ago. So yeah, speaking in support of this, I think it's a good reflection of the coverage of our district.
Councillor Hira.
Kia ora. Sorry, I should have picked up on this earlier, Mayor Andy, when you asked the question around putting a recommendation through about track. And I want to know whether or not that can get put up onto the table as well.
Yeah, I think
That was the retention of track as a standing committee within council.
Yeah, I think we'd deal with that as a separate item, councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Just taking, do you wish to speak around the option B that has been moved and seconded?
No,
Any
I'm
further-
happy to listen to what people have got to say, to be honest.
Any further positions from councillors? Councillor Ash, you had your hand up.
It's not a further position, it's just supporting this this motion. I think the diversity is really, really important. Keeping those numbers is incredibly important in a district such as ours. Ensuring that we've got many voices around the table is super, super important. And I think what we're doing to ensure that we've got the representation for all of our people throughout the district, I think we're on the right track with this resolution. Thank you.
Councillor Dalgety.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Dalgety. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I suspect I'm going to be a lone voice on this one, but it is a democratic process that we work through. My fellow councillors, as we've all been in workshops and heard my views around the representation on this. So I'm not going to support option B, and I will be voting against option B in favour of another option. I will mention that other option should this motion fall as to which one I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. And then Councillor Duncan, Councillor Dalgety.
I will be supporting this motion. I strongly believe in having that representation of communities of interest. I think we're a big area and there are intricacies in our different districts that individuals who live there understand better than others, even though we represent right across the district once we're elected. In terms of this proposal, it does affect Hunterville, and I believe Hunterville constituents are best served in the central ward rather than in the two ward system and being grouped with Taihape. And the other thing is that this does meet that criteria we're asked to measure with at the moment of being under 10%.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan. You're on mute. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Sorry. Just to say that I think that this is a lot of councillors and that we have got a relatively small number of people who are representing. I totally agree that we are very diverse and the spread of our district is huge. So we have lots of different communities of interest. But I still think that this number, a total of 12 with our mayor, is a huge number of councillors to have. And I wonder if it's a little bit unwieldy. And I would prefer option A because it still gives a reasonably good spread. And not forgetting that both of the multi-ward representatives are very much active members as well. It's not just reducing one area and not having any replacements.
You have, I think, made Councillor Wilson smile. But other than that, look, is there anybody that hasn't spoken that is the right to speak? Right, I will put it to the vote. Those in favour of option B being the preferred position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
What about you? 7.
Sorry?
7 with you.
7 with me. So the vote is carried. Congratulations, councillors. Now we also need to, within this, Katrina, would it be advisable to make a recommendation around the engagement? I note you have put an engagement around the food business grading bylaw as part of this.
No, that's the next item.
Yeah, but do you want to do something separately with this?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the question for consideration for elected members is whether or not to delegate the hearing of submissions to the Policy Planning Committee or to have a separate council meeting. So this would be an additional council meeting on that same day.
Thank you. I knew there was something that we were missing. I was trying to think what it was. So the recommendation, could we put it up on the board, please, so we get this absolutely right? The recommendation that council delegate the hearing of submissions on the initial proposal for the 2021 representation review to the Policy and Planning 14th of October 21 meeting, or that council schedules an additional meeting on the 14th of October for the hearing of submissions on the initial proposal. Please disregard the comment that was put up there with regard to my position. Okay, thank you. I can't see that. Would there a councillor wish to move something? Councillor Belsham, do you wish to move?
Yes, I'd be happy to move to delegate the hearing process to the Policy and Planning Committee to speed the process up.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Duncan, you're seconding. Any questions? No. Councillor Belsham, do you wish to speak to the motion? No. Right, I'll put it straight to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. I think that deals with the information we had to deal with regards to the representation review. I'll go to you, Councillor Hero, as to whether you want to make an additional recommendation.
Kilda, yes, I'd like to, taking on board the kōrero that you'd put up around track. I'd like to put a recommendation up that the council recognises that track will be remaining. And I'm sorry, I'm not very good at putting together what that recommendation, but something within that vein. It's actually.
Could I help you?
Absolutely. Thank you.
The recommendation could read that council note the intention to retain the Te Rupe Car Committee, and further that it will continue to be our principal engagement process with iwi.
Kilda.
Thank you. Happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Are you prepared to move that on that basis?
Yes, I am.
Staff, before I look for a seconder, is there any staffing issue around this? Any?
No, Your Worship. I just want to make sure that we've got the resolution correct, and perhaps Carol could confirm that you've got that.
We had it drafted, yes.
Oh.
Yes. So we're fine. Looking for a seconder to it. Councillor Ash, I think you had your hand up. Are you wishing to second? Thank you. Councillor Hero, do you wish to speak to this?
No, I think that it's something that we've discussed in past, and I just think that it needs to be something that's put through as a recommendation.
I'll speak in favour of this. I totally support this. There was some degree of nervousness around Te Rupe Car as to what their role would be. And I think this absolutely clarifies it for the record. Any further speakers? Councillor Ash, you had a raised hand.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely a no-brainer. To date, Te Rupe Car have been operating in this space, and we've been fortunate to have such a great relationship. Yeah, we just need to make sure that it's cemented so that it's all strong going forward.
Kia ora.
Sorry. Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
I just had a request to note those who were against option B, to note that in the minutes. So could I please have an indication who was against?
Yes. So option B, we are recording votes against from Councillor Wilson, Councillor Panapa. That's it. And Councillor Duncan. Thank you, councillors. Before we move on in the order paper, I think there's the opportunity for the Chief Executive to update us on, as elected officials, with regards to Council's response to COVID and lockdown. Peter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I perhaps should have asked you about this prior to the meeting, so my apologies for that. Sharon, you'll see, just popped up online. Sharon has been our controller for the first period, and she's prepared a wee brief for elected members. I'm happy to take questions at the end of it, Your Worship.
Thank you. Sharon.
Kia ora koutou, and hi everyone. So Council's Emergency Operations Centre has been working a small team, just as a small incident management team, since the 18th of August, and it was of course the day that lockdown began. The team's been operating mostly remotely, and we've been operating in two separate bubbles. The reason for this is if we do need to scale up, we want to ensure that we are protecting our responders and following all the COVID guidelines in terms of our response. The team is ready to scale up if required, and also has plans for de-escalation as and when required. We've also got escalation and contingency plans in place for a range of other scenarios, and that includes being prepared to step up and manage a concurrent event. So if there was a concurrent emergency event, such as a flood situation or an earthquake, we do have a team identified who can step up and manage that also. That would of course be an unfortunate circumstance. I just wanted to give you an idea of the national perspective, and in particular reflect on some of the differences that we're experiencing from last time, particularly from a civil defence perspective. So firstly, civil defence's role in the response is somewhat different to last time. Last time, civil defence led the program called Caring for Communities. So Caring for Communities is it's the national welfare support package that is designed to support communities in times of need, such as a COVID-19 lockdown. And so CDM was the lead agency for that last time. You may also recall the last time we had a regional 0800 number for civil defence welfare support that members of the community could contact. And we also had what was called some Category 2 funding. So that was a special appropriation fund set up under the National Civil Defence and Emergency Management Plan. And that was some funding that was available for people who didn't meet the usual criteria for funding reimbursement, noting that COVID-19 was really different to what we usually experience in an emergency event, in that people weren't they weren't finding themselves unable to be in their homes. They were able to be in their homes. It's just that they weren't able to leave them. That Category 2 funding enabled us to do things like top up our food banks and top up our food pantries and other emergency food security providers. The other key difference from last time is that last time you may recall that there was a national declaration in place and that the National Crisis Management Centre was active. So that was last time. So this time, there isn't a national declaration in place, and it's a Ministry of Health led event under operating under the Health Act. So this time, the Ministry of Social Development is the lead agency for caring communities, and that includes financial support and food grants to individuals, and also support for food banks to enable them to top up. This time there isn't a regional or national 0800 civil defence welfare line. However, people are referred to the 0800 numbers for the Ministry of Social Development. So this time, the role of civil defence is, it's as per the COVID-19 Caring for Communities National Resurgence Plan. And in simple terms, our role is to connect with agencies and partners, including iwi and Pacifica communities, and then to fill any gaps that cannot be met by those agencies. So in other words, civil defence this time is sort of the last port of call, whereas previously it was the first port of call. So the information that's been communicated nationally is that the first port of call for support is family and whānau, followed by online options. So for example, if food security is the issue, people are encouraged to look at online purchasing and delivery options. The next port of call, particularly if there's a financial concern, is the Ministry of Social Development, and civil defence is able to be contacted and we can step in if all those other options haven't worked out for the person. So our observations are that the key needs at present, which may need to be met by civil defence, most of these relate to food security at present. So that includes financial issues for people who have a financial concern that is impacting their food security, and for whatever reason they haven't met the Ministry of Social Development criteria for a food grant. The other issue we are noticing is access issues. So this is for our members of our community who can pay for food, but actually getting out and about to access food is a challenge for them. So it's someone who cannot access food and also has no options for people to shop for them, and for whatever reason may not be able to access an online delivery service. And the third issue that appears to be emerging is the supply and topping up of non-food bank providers. And an example of that is our food pantries, for example. So our ability to top up the food pantries. So look, I mean, they rely on donations, their supplies get quite low, and they're not in the category of being a registered food bank such that they are able to access funding from the Ministry of Social Development. So this is a gap that's been identified. It is, at this time around, it is not eligible for the Category 2 Appropriation Fund, unfortunately. That is something that our Emergency Operations Centre team has raised at a national level with the National Emergency Management Agency, as well as with MSD, and it is currently being worked through, but at this stage we don't have a clear solution on the ability to top up the likes of our food pantry and receive reimbursement of that funding. However, the team is working really hard on a solution for that, and is also working with our food pantries just to check in on their stocks and their immediate needs. So look, the other things to keep in mind, of course, is that there may be other areas that we are asked to respond into in terms of supporting vaccination centres, MIQ facilities. So again, we do have the plans in place to support those facilities if we need to. Peter, did you want to add anything or any questions?
I just draw it to the attention of elected members that in the absence of this funding for our food pantries, I've authorised $5,000 of our operational expenditure to or a maximum of that to support the topping up, with the expectation we could recover that laterally from NEMA or MSD or whomever else. Your Worship, you may consider if the Mayoral Relief Fund could help with that. I appreciate I've not discussed this with you outside of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. First of all, in terms of process for today, Sharon, thank you for the report. I think it is valuable to have this report actually put into council minutes, and as such, with the Chief Executive's approval, what I would see is maybe a bullet point report along the lines that you've given be put into the council minutes under the executive report. And if there are any questions around that, it would need to be approved anyway in the following council meeting. So there is a process to check what you're putting in. I guess I'm asking both yourself and Peter whether that would be acceptable in terms of a process of recording.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think the team, it is difficult to work around COVID, and a number of people are giving a huge amount of their time, 7 days a week on this stuff. So thank you very much. Tracy, you had your hand up?
Yes, I've just got a question for our Chief Executive. You've just said that you're looking at putting forward a fund of $5,000 to go towards helping within the food bank space. Is that across, I'm not sure whether or not Bulls or Hunterville have a food bank as such, but I know Taihape definitely does have a food bank. So I'm just asking, is that going to be available for, is that split between all of the food banks, or how will that be distributed? Thank you.
Kia ora, Tracy. What Sharon's described is that there is uncertainty how our food pantries will get topped up. During that period of uncertainty, I've allowed our controllers, which is either Sharon or Johan, to spend no more than $5,000 to top up on an as needs basis. There is no formula for this. I just wish to recover the money after people have been fed and not before. So there are no rules around it other than it's up to the controller to make that contribution based on how he or she sees it.
Thank you very much.
I see Sharon. Comment.
Sorry?
Sharon wants to make a comment.
Sharon.
Thank you. I was just going to add to that to say that we are in regular contact with the food pantries in Marton, Bulls and Taihape to get a good understanding of what their supplies are like and what their immediate needs are like. They are that they receive donations in a slightly different way. So the situation in Marton and Bulls isn't necessarily the same as the situation in Taihape, but the controllers and the welfare team are keeping across where those needs are greatest.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Look, councillors, I'll move on. In terms of time frame, we will need to take a break about 3 o'clock. However, move on to item 10.2, the food business grading bylaw review, page number 47. Mr. Forster, are you online?
Yes, Your Worship. Can everyone hear me?
Might put his camera on because his video's not there.
Okay, that's fine. Can we just go to the recommendations? First recommendation is that we receive the report. Could somebody please, Councillor Hira, Councillor Gordon, moving, those in favour? Those against, carried. Thank you. We have a number of recommendations there. George, do you wish to take us through this report? How do you wish to handle it?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just make a few comments in regards to the report. So the purpose of the report is to adopt the bylaw for public consultation. As was discussed at the Policy Planning Committee meeting, undertaking consultation on the bylaw would allow those food businesses who currently receive a grade an opportunity to have their say on the bylaw. Obviously, this would be alongside the rest of the general public as well. Apologies around the track changes not shown in the order paper. We'll try our best to make sure that doesn't happen again. There's a few issues with formatting on the Word document as opposed to a PDF. But the track changes in there just show the sections around food training and staff sickness policy removal. So there'll no longer be a requirement of that when it comes to the assigning a grade to a food business, as opposed to the central regulations will be used for that. I'm happy to take any further questions of the report.
Just before we do that, I'll move to the Chair of Policy and Planning. Councillor Gordon, this has been in your space. Do you wish to make any comment?
We did go over this fairly deeply in policy and planning, and debated amongst ourselves. But really, I think the recommendations that George has put in front of us pretty much summarise where we got to.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
I don't want to sway everybody's opinion, though. To be quite honest, I'd just rather leave it there.
All right. Any questions of the report that you want clarification on, Councillor Carter?
Yes, there was, at the end of the report, you've deleted out the training part of it, in which it has a score of 5 maximum, but you haven't altered the score rating for the gradings. Your maximum at the moment is 25, where your score ratings go to 30. Is that something that's been overlooked?
Yes, sorry, that would have been an overlook. We can amend that for the consultation, but we just need a recommendation, the amended bylaw, or as amended, just so we can make those changes for the consultation.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Bearing in mind the earlier performance at council, would somebody like to move recommendation 2? Councillor Belsham, you're moving. Councillor Ash, you're seconding. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Belsham?
No, I don't. I think it's appropriate how it's written.
Any speakers to or for against the motion? Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Recommendation 3, looking for a mover to this. Councillor Gordon, you're moving. Councillor, can I have another hand? Councillor Dalgety, seconding. Sorry, Councillor Lambert, I would have grabbed you, but you were just... do you wish to speak to it?
Oh, your worship.
Put to the vote. Those in favour? Right. Thank you. Carried. Where are we up to? Recommendation 4. We've done... This is the delegation of the hearing of submissions, policy and planning. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Ash moving. Councillor Hero seconding. Do you wish to speak to the motion? Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. Is there anything else, Mr. Forster, that I need to do with regard to this item?
No, that was it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. I move to item 10.3, the due date for instalment 1 of the 2021-22 rates. Would somebody like to move to receive the report? Councillor Hira, Councillor Lambert seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Dave, do you want to take us through this?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Just get the camera angle right and get my best side.
I'm not going to comment.
Just bear with us while we get me on the screen. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, all. Yeah, so I think there was an email circulated just subsequent to the council paper being put on the agenda. We had a rethink about the process to achieve what we wanted to achieve. So I think if you've got the council paper in front of you, the 3 main clauses that remain and underpin this paper are 2.1, 2.2 and 3.3. And they basically say that the due date for the first instalment was last Friday. That obviously coincided with lockdown. That would mean, strictly speaking, that people that wanted to come in and pay over the counter couldn't, and they'd incur penalties. And I think we all agree that that was not in the spirit or where we wanted these penalties to be applied. So at the time, we thought the best way to get around that would be to change the due date, but advice we've got is that a subsequent process would be better. If it's okay, I'll read out the explanation. I think it may have been circulated anyway, but I'll read it out. Legal advice was sought in relation to changing the due date for instalment 1 of the 21-22 rates. The advice identified potential procedural concerns with changing the due date for the first instalment, so an alternative solution is now preferred. It is now proposed that the due date of 20 August 2021 be retained, and anyone who has not yet been able to pay their rates by that due date due to restrictions imposed by the current COVID lockdown will have penalties applied as per the rates resolution, but any penalties will then be remitted. The Chief Executive has delegation to remit rate penalties, so no formal resolution from Council is required. So this updated information is now being presented for Council's information. And shall I read out the revised recommendation?
Any comment from the Chair of Finance, Deputy Mayor Nigel Belsham? Nigel.
No, I think that updated information covers off the perspective of council, and it does deal with basically the issue of our ratepayers not being able to get in during COVID lockdown. So, you know, there's a way of dealing with that under current processes. So I guess my only question is, we are receiving that as a tabled document. Is that correct? That the information that Dave has just read out and was subsequently sent out?
It becomes a supplementary recommendation, and I'll just reread it if you haven't got it in front of you. The recommendation would be that following legal advice, Council notes the due date for instalment 1 of the 21-22 rates will be retained, and also notes that anybody who is unable to pay their rates by that date, in brackets due to COVID restrictions, will have any penalties remitted by the Chief Executive under delegated authority.
Yes. I'm happy to move that.
Just before you move that, the only question I'd have of yourself as Chair of Finance and our Chief CFO is there doesn't appear to be an end date to that position.
Instalment 1, no?
Yes, but what I'm saying is, does this mean that somebody could not pay their instalment 1 rates until when? I would have expected to have seen for a period of somewhere in, move to the Chief Executive.
I think, Your Worship, it says in the in brackets because of COVID lockdown. So if we were in COVID lockdown for 6 months, that would apply.
Okay. All right. I'm prepared to accept that. Councillor Belsham, are you happy to so move on that basis?
Yes, happy to move. Yeah, I think the recommendation did cover that COVID period. So I think it is covered in that recommendation. Thank you.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Wilson seconding. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Belsham? Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against?
Your Worship, we have a hand up. Forgive me for interrupting, from Councillor Gordon.
Sorry, I missed you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor.
My question is, with the penalties being awarded against a late party and then being remitted, are those parties going to be informed of this, or is it effectively a procedural detail that happens without a ratepayer being aware of it?
So it's both. So our website and Facebook show this current process is what we're looking to come up with a solution so they won't get penalised. Rates have to, the penalties have to be run, but the letters won't be being sent out. So the ratepayers won't be informed they've been penalised and then told, oh, it's been remitted. That it'll just be happening. They'll be unaware of it.
Thank you. Why I asked the question, you know, we have a number of elderly in the district, and the last thing we want is suddenly notice to arrive in the mail, and for all the toys to get thrown out, and cause undue stress. So thank you. Good solution.
Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Just before we move on, this is because of the inability to be able to come to council, but is it worth noting that council no longer accepts cheques, and the only way that they could pay in front counter would be cash or card. But presumably there'd still be a number using both cash or card?
Yes, I couldn't tell you the number, but there are those that do pay cash, yeah. And that they actually want to come in and pay.
Yeah, I get that. Thank you very much. I was really just wanting to highlight that we no longer accept cheques.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on to item 10.4, the options for changing rooms, Te Matapihi Bulls Centre. Would somebody like to do the easy one? The recommendation, we received the reports. This includes the reports from Jane Dunn. So would somebody like to so move, please, that we receive? Thank you, Councillor Carter, Councillor Duncan. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. From staff point of view, who's going to take us through this?
Adina.
Thank you, Arno. Do you want to highlight anything or take us through it? How do you want to handle it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've got my project manager, Adina, that will take us through the report.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Adina.
I just wanted to go through with the report because it may be just a little bit different than what we expected it to be like. We looked at the recommendation from the last meeting was to go away and investigate the selected option number 2 further. And we have done that by asking a second architect to peer review what they had suggested, as well as getting some more extra pricing and other people's professional opinions on the feasibility of the space under the stage. Unfortunately, they have come back a bit more negative around, especially around the height of the space under the stage. And due to that and other reasons outlined in the report, we would like to recommend to remove the second option as an option. Based on the expectation that maybe option 2 is not feasible anymore, we have asked the second architect to come up with his suggestion of what might be a...
Can I just stop you there a second, and just in terms of being able to handle things in some sort of order against what you're saying, would you be happy if council discussed the recommendation 2 not to take option 2 further now? Would
sure,
that be? Would somebody like to move recommendation 2, and we'll see if that gains wings. Councillor Belsham, you're moving recommendation 2. Councillor Gordon, you're seconding it. Councillor Belsham, do you wish to speak to this?
Well, no, it's as Adina has spoken to this, it is no longer feasible or achievable, and it's not a desired outcome. So I don't think we even spend time discussing that option 2 any further.
Does anybody else wish to speak to it? Otherwise, I'll put it to the vote. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. That removes option 2 and clears the way forward for you to discuss the further options we have in front of us. Please carry on. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Thank you. That was a good suggestion. So we have asked the second architect to come in with fresh eyes and give his opinion on what he would recommend we should possibly be doing with the space that is there. So he actually came and visited. It's the same architect that is currently or has designed the building in Taihape, the amenities building. And we have received his suggestion basically around, his focus was around making the whole changing space and the stage accessible, I guess in a more inclusive way. So he looked at the options of having a lift in 3 different positions, either on the outside of the building, on the inside of the building, basically starting on the stage and then going up on the outside of the top room, and then also an option where it's fully internal, the lift, which has come out the most favorable and most recommendable. And I'm happy to take any questions to that. There's sketches attached to the report that should give you a better understanding of where exactly and how it would look.
Yeah, just before you do that, I just would like to acknowledge that the other option presented by members of the Bulls community, past Councillor Jane Dunn, would have preferred, I'm sure, to present this under public forum. It's a little bit like the earlier Bulls one, that wasn't possible. And this order paper had already been constructed around this. So that opportunity may well be there in the future if this proceeds in this direction. Sorry, please. So are you happy to take questions, Adina, from councillors?
Yes, thank you.
Take questions. I have questions. Councillor Duncan, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Duncan.
Just going back to the other occasion where we weren't able to have a presentation, and we came to the conclusion, I think, that the report should lay on the table until we could have a presentation. Is that something that should be considered at this point before we go further?
You could consider that in terms of a public forum. However, in this case, the option has been put in front of council for consideration. So I suspect that would just delay, but that's my opinion. Council staff may wish to delay this anyway to give them time to prepare. I don't know in terms of their workload. But yeah, it's an option. Councillor Gordon, then I'll go to the Chief Executive. Councillor Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. These are very interesting options that have been put in front of us. One question that I have is around the size of the floor plan of the lift and what impact changing the size of that lift has on the overall cost of any of those options. Because, and the reason why I ask this is, having observed shows and various other the sort of events that are put on in a hall like this, sometimes you wish to bring 1 or 2 people to a stage, and sometimes you wish to bring a whole heap of people to a stage simultaneously. And so what the report really hasn't answered, I mean, it gives access, it gives an alternative access between the stage and this top floor. What it doesn't show is how sensitive that analysis is to the size of the lift. And that would certainly interest me, because I think these are quite innovative solutions that have been provided. But the size of the lift might actually dictate which one of those we choose, because we have a limited amount of floor space in the, I can't remember the name of the room, on the top story. And so whether or not we chose to have the lift inside it, beside it, or outside it might be dictated by the size of the lift footprint.
Yeah, I was going to raise a similar issue, Councillor Gordon. For instance, if you had 30 people on the top floor wanting to use the lift, it's not only the size of the lift, it's how many trips does it have to make and the timing issues to be able to achieve that. I suspect at that stage you'd have people just going down the stairs anyway. But I'll go to, I don't really want to get into a detailed discussion because those reports are still to come. The Chief Executive, Peter, and then I'll go to Councillor Wilson.
It was in response to Councillor Duncan, Your Worship. Councillors may, or elected members may wish to ask staff to investigate further more than one of the options that are presented on the paper. So, for example, you may choose 4B and the late addition by the members of the Bulls community.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm actually happy to move one of the options, if I may, in the interest of moving this item along, and also in the interest of having a discussion that relates directly to a recommendation. And I'd like to recommendation 3, that the option presented by the Bulls community be investigated further. And I would like to speak to my reasoning behind that if I was to receive a seconder.
Yeah, are you saying that the investigation would be limited to that option or could include other options as well? So the way you're saying you're limiting it to investigation of that option?
Well, yes, I am, Your Worship, but that would be clarified in my reasoning once I was speaking to the motion, should it be seconded.
Okay, looking for a seconder too. Councillor Carter's seconding. You wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I think there's a couple of things that we need to get sorted out here. Tamata Pihi as a building is a fantastic space. It works as it stands right now. It's a great asset to the Rangitikei. It's a great asset to the people of the Rangitikei. It's a great asset to the people of Bulls. I think it's an iconic building. It's received significant praise, and I don't think we should lose sight of that. The problem that we've got is that the building doesn't deliver what it was intended to deliver in the consultation process, I believe, that was put through to the people of Bulls. Looking at the options that are sitting here in front of us now with regards to lifts, I still don't believe that that ultimately addresses the issues that have been identified to us. And I think it is foolhardy to go down those options. And I really just wonder if we have really considered the issue that has been presented to us on a number of occasions with regards to Tamata Pihi, and whether or not we have just given it some lip service. I really am a little bit concerned by that. So I think the only way we're really going to get around the table and get a conclusive view on this is to go into some really true, meaningful conversation and consultation with the Bulls community in particular as to what works and what doesn't work. There will be some things that we can do. There will be some things that we can't do. Some of the options that have been presented by this secondary option from former Councillor Dunn on behalf of the user group down there, it may well turn out that it's not feasible. It may well turn out that it's not an option that they, to the way that they see it could be. But unless we're going to engage and have that conversation, I see us putting good money in to try and solve a problem that ultimately we're not going to fix. And I think the only way to actually fix this issue is to do it meaningfully in some really good open conversation with that user group, which I'm at this point in time, I must say I don't believe we have done, even though there was a conversation out of a previous council meeting to look at those options. So I think that's the only option we have.
Thank you. I can now take the speakers to the motion. I know Councillor Duncan. I suspect this is one where, again, I will probably waive the 3 speakers for and 3 speakers against rule. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I was very pleased to see that this had gone out to the community again and that they had come back so strongly from what Councillor Dunn, ex-Councillor Dunn has presented. And I applaud her for her continued work on behalf of her community. I have spoken about this before. The lift options to me are access to the stage, and they would work for speakers and very small groups. But you would not be able to hold events with that sort of access, and especially not school groups, as she has I think the report is very, very detailed, and I don't need to go into it, so I'd like to speak. I just think that both of those options she's presented look very doable.
Councillor Hira, I think you raised your hand.
Yes, so I'd like to support what's been put forward by Councillor Wilson as well. I think that this issue has that if I'm totally in the same vein of if we don't do what this community wants, and it's not that we're being taken ransom for anything, but if I feel that if we don't really deal with this issue, it's just going to keep coming up in subsequent councils, and so I believe that we need to leave it there and just keep talking, even though it might be the most expensive option, but it'll be something that just keeps arising and arising if we don't do it properly.
I don't want to deal with this. Further speakers? I'll speak to this. Look, I support the motion from Councillor Wilson. I don't for a second think that other external lifts will solve this issue. And I think that we go through the investigation and understanding of the report. It may well be then that we need to go back and look at other options, but let's get a clear understanding of this. And there may be slight variations on it in terms of staffing, because I note within the report it's very similar to some of the options that have been previously considered by council. So there may well be a blend in there from my point of view in terms of investigating the concept. But I think that there'd be sufficient scope within for staff to be able to do that. So in other words, if the technical diagrams that were given as part of that option were considered, there may well be very slight variations on that could be considered at the same time. And I believe there'd be scope for staff to look at that. So I'll support the motion. Any other speakers? Councillor Dalgety.
I support the motion also. Just clarity here, sorry. Did the Bulls group, was the lift options, were they aware of the lift options? Or is that those lift options have come in since they've got together and their initial proposal?
They have come in at the same time, sorry. Yeah, so we received the proposal from the ex-councillor, but at the same time we were getting the suggestion from the second architect.
So are they aware of the lift options or not?
No.
Thank you, yeah.
Right, look, Councillor Gordon, and then I'll go back to Councillor Wilson for right of reply. Councillor Gordon.
Your Worship, because we're all on Zoom, we can't see the motion. So could someone read it out again? Because we may need to tweak it a little bit, please.
Yeah. The recommendation would be that council endorse option 3 or the option presented by members of the Bulls community, and request staff to complete more detailed engineering and cost analysis and report back to the October 21 council meeting. So as I said, this motion would give you scope to look at slight variations around option 3 as against or with option presented by the Bulls community. But essentially you're looking at two options here around an external build. Is that correct, Arno? Do you have any questions around that?
I have one question that I need your guidance on, Your Worship. Is in a previous council meeting, we have, or councillors voted not to support option 3.
Yes, correct, but I believe we have dealt with that because we identified at that council meeting not to support option 3 on the basis that we were supporting option 2. However, with the decision to revoke that decision opens up the ball game again, I believe.
Can I just ask Peter, as the CEO, if he's got any input on that?
Certainly.
I was nodding there to support His Worship. The option that councillors had previously selected was the preferred option 2, and so they dismissed option 3 as a result. Now option 2 is not available, and so I'm happy with the resolution should it be passed by elected members.
Councillor Gordon, and I'll go back to Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gordon.
Your Worship and other councillors, I wonder, by being as explicit as we are in this motion, are we effectively fencing in staff and any other consultants that they might want to employ into what the solution could be? I think we have to be, if we're not going to have a solution inside the building, then it's going to be outside the building, assuming we're going to go forwards. But I wonder, are we being too prescriptive in this motion? I wonder, should we just say we would like staff to investigate further options and just leave it out there and let them go away and see what they come up with? Because I almost get the feeling we're trying to second guess this. And I mean, and I'm not pouring cold water on previous options brought up by staff or the Bulls community or anyone, but I think we've got a building that's there, and some of the reasons why we didn't want to go to an external option previously are still valid. And so I don't want to see us make our staff walk a tightrope. I think we need to give them enough space, and any other consultant enough space to really think this one through and get it right.
Yeah, I take the view that you're speaking against the motion because the motion is quite explicit along with some of the reasons given. So I'll move to write a reply. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I acknowledge some valid points from Councillor Gordon there as well. To answer the question with regards to is the user group aware of the lift options, my understanding of is yes, they are. They have the order papers. Is the conversation that I've had that they have the order papers and that they have seen the order papers, which have been out for circulation. So they are aware of the order paper, the lift options, is my understanding. And I think really, I come back to the point that I just don't think any of the options that we've been presented with today, apart from really looking at this outside option, is actually going to ever fix the problem. And I think lifts just create more and more issues for us. They create more problems than they possibly ever solve. And I'm sorry, what was offered and what was delivered didn't equal the same thing. And we've got to accept that. It's not right. It's a great building. I'm supportive of it. I want to see more new buildings around the district. I make no bones about that. Everybody's well aware of that. It's a great space. It'll be fantastic when it's completed. The options are huge. It's significant, but we've got to get it right, and it's not right. And I think we have to have further engagement with the Bulls user groups, in particularly, to get the space right. And to me, the only space can be some sort of outside external access is all I can see, because we've had a look at internal modifications and changing it around for the last 6 months, and I don't believe anyone's come up with a solution that's going to work. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I now must put it to a vote. So having had the right of reply, so could I have a show of hands, those in favour? Vote is carried. Councillor Gordon, do you wish your vote against recorded?
No, I made my point, and I think everybody's going to have an open-ended discussion about it anyway.
Yeah, but thank you. Is there anything else that I've got to do with regard to this item? No. Look, what I'll do is, sorry, Peter.
Thank you, Your Worship. It would be good for staff to make sure that we have captured all of the issues that elected members want us to. I wonder how we might do that, Your Worship.
The meeting has been recorded, so I think that's your answer. So you can go back into that recording and listen to the views and issues that have been raised. Does that answer it for you?
Yes, thank you.
Look, I will adjourn the council meeting now. We're required to take a break. Councillors, quarter of an hour, would that give you time to do whatever you want? So if we round that off, 5, 10, 25 past, we're back online. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody that's sticking with us. online? Can I have some thumbs up that you can hear me, please? Awesome, thank you very much. Welcome back into the fight or the war or whatever. Is it like once more into the breach, my friends? Item 10.5, Tie Happy Grandstand options for restoration seismic strengthening. And Arno, are you going to take us through this?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you for that. Now, on this report, we've had a couple of questions since the order paper has gone out, and I think it'll be valuable for me just to put a bit of context around it before I start on the report itself. So a couple of months ago, staff were asked to have a look at the Tie Happy Grandstand and to get more detailed information on the roof, on the structural assessment of the building, and the geotech and the foundations of the building. And because this kind of overlapped the previous financial year and this financial year and a new LTP, I might just read to you what is included in the LTP under the Tie Happy Memorial Park community facilities. And what we've included in the LTP was the most likely scenario is to build a new amenities facility for sports groups and community groups, which has been confirmed by council, retain the historic grandstand and relocate the existing grandstand toilets to another location if they are still required once optioneering is completed. And then there's a capital budget included for that to the order of 2.148 million. Underneath that, we noted that the principal alternative is to leave the current grandstand and toilet facilities as they are, accepting expenditure might need to occur for earthquake strengthening at an estimated $1 million without the addition of any amenities. So in light of that, the consultants that we use, so these are architects and engineers, came back to us and gave us two options, and that is what is included in the report today. Option one, we only strengthen the grandstand, so that is what is included in the LTP. We only strengthen it from the 25% where it is now, which is not safe, up to 67%, which is the national requirement. Option two that they came back is we strengthen the structure, but we also do some renovations. So renovations to the bottom of the building, so the utility spaces, if you like, at the bottom of the building. What we're doing in this document today, we're offering both as opportunities to council for your consideration and to guide us into what you'd like to do from this point onwards. As you can see in the report, if we strengthen only, indicative costing is about $800,000. And if you would consider strengthening and renovation, it will come to $1.3 million. The recommendations gives you the option to either select option one or option two, depending on your requirements.
Thank you very much. I'll take questions around the report first. Question, Councillor Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Worship. My question is to Arno. If we were to choose option one, does any of that strengthening work preclude anything in option two that the community might wish to fund and undertake at a later date?
Good question.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, it does not exclude any of those.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Given that there is and I can't quite see it right at this minute, but there is a sentence in here around a paragraph around doing this work at the same time as the amenities build for efficiencies. I'm just concerned that if the community were wanting to do work, then it actually should happen at the same time as well for the same reasons. So have we got the opportunity, is this the right time to actually ask the community what their appetite is for finding extra money for this extra work? How does that normally work?
That's probably a political question more than a technical one, Councillor. I guess your view then comes down to, again, the options 1 or 2. I'm not sure what you're suggesting. Are you suggesting that things be put on hold to go back to the community to ask their views?
If I can answer that, what I'm suggesting, what I would like to see is, in fact, both options continue to be investigated, and at the same time, perhaps the community is notified that there is such a discrepancy in funds for an enhancement of the building, and whether they would, well, because they have already indicated that they are prepared to contribute funds, and I know that's something that the council has said before, that they would like to see community engagement with this project. I'm just wondering when that happens and if this is the right time to have that happen while continuing with investigations around these options.
Yeah, maybe we go back a step here and perhaps we get some idea from staff as to how this ties in with what went out in terms of the LTP, which was the engagement process that we had and decision-making process that we had around this building. Staff, my recollection, and I stand to be corrected here, was that we went out and adopted within our LTP that we would spend up to $1 million, and that was a strengthening and fire protection type status of the building. Am I correct on that?
If I may, Your Worship, either Arno or perhaps Carol could drag that up now so you're familiar with exact wording.
Do you want what was in the consultation document?
Yeah, it's different.
So the only way we can do is to go back and look at the consultation document and what council's preferred position going into the LTP was. Because otherwise you could be in danger of us looking to overturn an LTP decision. Please, staff, advise me if I'm going down the wrong rabbit burrow with this. But I feel as though we need to check against what decisions were made.
I agree with you, Your Worship.
Want me to? I'll read out our preferred option. Okay. So we continue to investigate the refurbishment and restoration of the grandstand and how this could be funded in collaboration with our community. This is our preferred option because we know our community cares about this building and its historical significance. Upgrading the grandstand will ensure this is a sound structure that can be used by our community sports teams and visitors to our district. And it goes on to say this option could mean we seek options for funding within the community if we ultimately decide to proceed with the refurbishment. We've included a $1 million provision from cash reserves to contribute towards the project, and while this is reflected in the rates and the rate impact figures, it is possible we'll also need to seek additional funds through other avenues should the cost of the project exceed $1 million.
So my read of that would be that it doesn't preclude putting toilets in specifically, but it does put a financial limit in terms of the LTP. Look, councillors, is anybody, we have two options on the table. Does anybody want to put an option so we're speaking to a motion? Councillor Wilson, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I'll move option 1 to be received for a start, followed by...
for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. And your next motion?
That we support option 1, that we upgrade the grandstand to 67% of NBS, and as it is written there.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter seconding. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Your Worship, I will. I think what's important here is that we get the processes right, and thank you for going back to what was in the LTP discussion, because I was about to suggest exactly the same thing. What was in the LTP document doesn't preclude anything else, but it does have a financial up to the $1 million, and I think that's the key thing here. So I fail to see how we could even consider an option that is in excess of that, which clearly option 2 is, because it's not what we consulted on. What may come out of this is some support from the community to raise the additional funds to do some internal work as well with regards to toilets and ablution blocks. And if that does, I can see that engagement working very, very well between council, interested parties up there in the north of our district, and or even the contractors themselves that are doing it. The big thing is that we have made a statement that says we will spend up to $1 million in Taipi, and that is all we can do at this point in time. I don't believe that we can even consider the second option.
Thank you. Look, I'll actually speak to this one. Apart from the LTP position, I have a couple of reservations around if we had gone for option 2. And the reservations would be, 1, certainly funding. 2, it talks about toilets, and essentially what I'm nervous around is we could have a village of toilets at Memorial Park. So we have toilets that are associated with the swimming pool. We have the existing toilets, to be blunt, disgusting, and would need of renewal. We have a playground group that have been working very hard to redo the playground, and I support them strongly in their endeavours, but undoubtedly they will want toilets associated with that. And could the underground grandstand solve that? Possibly, but it's not quite in the right place. And then we have toilets at the new amenities block build. The next one around toilets is security. So I'd be very nervous around putting, for instance, toilets underneath a wooden grandstand that is enclosed. The high risk of vandalism and fire associated with that would be a real worry to me. So I will support option 1. Any further speakers? Councillor Belsham, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Belsham.
Thank you. It's a question, and I was on the understanding that that $1 million provision that was in the LTP was also on the proviso that we were going to seek external funding. So it wasn't going to be the ratepayer stumping up $1 million. That was the provision for the restoration, but we were seeking external funding through the Giblin Group or someone along those lines. Is that still happening, or or have we made a decision to put $1 million towards this project?
You're correct. That was the understanding, that we would be seeking external funding. And part of that funding was targeted around discussions with Heritage New Zealand. And that raises another question in my mind. When you start putting other features into and change the building, whether it would still meet heritage viewpoint. But the short answer is yes, we were meant to be seeking external funding. How much of that work has been done, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just don't want us to lose focus of that, because you know, that to see $1 million in the LTP budgets, but it was on the proviso of seeking external funding, and I want to make sure that that's in the forefront of any decisions that are being made.
Yeah. Councillor Duncan next.
Thank you. Yes, so once again, it was about seeking external funding and working with the community, as Mrs. Gordon read out, and it quite clearly says in there that our preferred position is refurbishment and restoration, which is not limited to earthquake strengthening, I would have thought. And the Taihape Heritage Group, the chair of that subcommittee in charge of the grandstand, has actually sent me an email, which I'm very happy to share with councillors and council staff, around the fact that the ground floor of the grandstand very definitely held cloakrooms for men and women originally. So that would be part of the restoration and refurbishment. So once again, I'd like to take us back to the fact that I believe that this is endorsing, it says endorse option 1, is limiting us to a position when we're actually at a point where we now need to engage with binding funders in the community and perhaps external funders. And I believe we should complete further cost analysis on both options. That's why I will be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to vote for option 1, but I don't see option 1 as the end point. I actually see option 1 as the beginning of the journey for this, for the grand old lady of the park. Really, I think it should signal to the community that yes, we're serious about getting stuff done, but I also think there's a signal there that to all the other groups, because there's an awful lot going to happen on that park in the next 3 to 5 or 10 years, that they need to start working together. They need to start coming up with some money, because actually money really talks. And I look at what else has happened in our district, in Bulls and Marton, and we've had very motivated groups who've come up with cash in hand. I think I support Councillor Duncan's stance, but we do need to get this show on the road. We can get a lot of the what I'd call infrastructure management stuff done, and then some of the other nice to haves that various groups might wish for. They need to start thinking and need to start talking, and they need to start coming up with some funding, because the ratepayer can't fund everything. So as I said, I see this as the beginning, start of the journey, not as the end. But I will be voting for this. If the community come along with some more money and more options in the future, I'm more than happy to listen.
Thank you, Councillor Ash.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable if I knew that this option 1 wasn't the end point, that it was actually just the beginning. And I don't think anything in the resolution actually states that. I'd also be interested to know whether or not Councillor Duncan was considering foreshadowing a motion that may support option 2 with some wording around community engagement or community involvement or something. So I'd be interested to know if there was going to be a foreshadowed motion in there, but I don't know about this option 1 with it the way it's worded, is it sort of sounds like that's the end point, and we're going to be stumping up the entire 800, and that might be done and dusted, game over, no more work done on it. So just, yeah, a bit more clarity around it, please.
Councillor Hira.
I would be in the same vein as Councillor Gordon, and given that it is the beginning of the journey for the grandstand, I believe that if we as far as option 2 is concerned, the part in option 2 that I don't agree with myself is the part where it says plus toilet facilities, because that goes against us actually building toilet facilities. But the option of getting it up to current building code and then potentially further restoration, I think that would be, I would be supportive of option 1. But again, yeah, using that as the beginning for the community. I'd also like to say something else in regards to quite often we make decisions around the table, and it's happened today. And quite frankly, as much as we can make decisions today at a meeting, after more thinking about things, people do change their minds. And then, there's more information that comes out, and then people think about things more and decide to have a change of heart. So, yeah, I would be supportive of option 1, but I wouldn't be supportive of us including in that toilet facilities, quite frankly. That's why we're going down the track of building a tie-happy amenities, the amenities build.
Thank you. Councillor Dalgety.
I just am concerned we don't seem to have a full picture here in terms of, what are Heritage New Zealand, what are their requirements, and really beyond the LTP, what does, given these 2 options, what would the community want? Yeah, I just feel that I'm worried we're going down a rabbit hole that we might not be able to get out of.
Write a reply, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and lots of interesting comments and thoughts from around the table. Yet my thoughts on it remain unchanged, simply on the basis of the fact of what we consulted in the long-term plan to go out and do is what we should do. We made a decision to put new toilets, facilities and amenities on Memorial Park, and the delays that it took to make that decision cost us millions. There's no doubt about that. The going backwards and forwards over 6 or 7 years of consultation cost us millions. And I can tell you right now, it probably cost us a lot more than what we're actually talking about strengthening the grand old lady of the park. We just simply cannot delay and keep going back and further asking for questions and asking for more information and more input. The simple reality of it is the building needs to be strengthened. Nothing about that strengthening is going to preclude anything, as Councillor Gordon said, that might be able to go on in the internal. And I agree with him. It is a journey. It's just the start of the process. But let's just get on and get started. Let's get the engineering designs done. Let's get the funding in place that we need to do. If we're looking for some funds to be contributed from, as Councillor Belsham has raised, well, let's start that process. But let's stop mucking around, because if we're still having this conversation a year's time, the strengthening we'll be talking about will be $2 million. And a year after that, it'll be 3. So I'm sorry, let's put our big boy nappies on and make the decision and get on with it.
Thank you. We've had a right of reply. I must put it to the vote. Could I please have a show of hands for those who vote in favour endorsing option 1? Motion is carried. Thank you. Is there anything else that I need to do with this item? No. Okay, moving into 11 and 11.1, the Taihape Amenities Building update. Would somebody like to move, first of all, that the Taihape Amenities Building update be received? Councillor Hira, Councillor Carter seconding. Those in favour? Carried, thank you. I just have one question of staff with regard to this item. When I read the reports, I've got a note to myself that part of this report in the previous council meetings, members were requested to review the design and presumably that design was reviewed because that goes back to a June meeting. And so I would have expected that there'd be an endorsement of the design somewhere in the process to indicate that that has happened. I believe it has happened, but perhaps that's an open-framed question back to staff, and Councillor Gordon as chair of that working group. Could somebody please advise me as to whether I'm correct?
Good. Perhaps if staff could go first.
What I would say is that there's a point at the end of the detailed design, which we're currently at about 60%, before we are putting in building consent, that we will ask for the council to endorse the detailed design.
If I recall correctly, Your Worship, the offer was made by the project team if elected members wish to see the design. It wasn't an approval step. Adina has outlined the next approval step.
I had a feeling that it was under the actions from the previous council. I believe that's where I saw it. So it'd be right back at the start of this order paper if that was the case, and I'll just try and find it.
I think if I could just fall in, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The idea with this report is to keep councillors up to speed with the journey. So as we go along, there will be slight changes as the structural engineers get on with their work. The last thing we wanted to do is to come back to you at a detailed design point and the design looks foreign, that you haven't seen it. So it's kind of flagging to you, we're 60% down the line. There's been slight, small changes, but this is what it looks like at the moment. And to keep you part of that journey, that's the idea of this report.
Yeah. I think Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Worship. Just to follow up on your query, this probably the version of plan before this detailed one was shared with park users, or those park users that chose to turn up to the meeting. But you know, going forwards, a lot more detail has appeared in this picture than was in previous ones, but that's the nature of a design process. I did have a little query, but I might perhaps raise it offline with Arno and Adina around detail. But yeah, I'm happy going forwards. But I guess my only other query was, at what stage do we intend to go back to users, the primary park user groups, and with regard to sporting?
I thought that had effectively already happened.
I was under the understanding that it was just going to be an ongoing sort of rolling front, if you like, a rolling process. But if I'm wrong, that's fine. I'll be corrected.
I think the arrangement with the user group was, from our point of view, that we will meet with them once we have achieved further steps. So currently we are at the 60%, which is a good time to probably re-engage with them now. Hopefully maybe after COVID levels have reduced.
So the question from me is, the next stages effectively are going out for quotes and contractors. Is that correct?
So we currently have already sent out a registration of interest for the construction contract, and we have that closing on Monday. And we had engagement with various companies to make sure that there's some interest. Once we have shortlisted 3 or 4 of those that come back, we will then send out the tender documentation, which will be past the council confirmation meeting. So the council confirms the detailed design plans, and those plans go then out to tender for those 3 shortlisted parties.
Yeah, if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may just quickly clear that up. So we've got 2 things happening at the same time. We are 60% through the detailed design. There's another 40% to go. Instead of waiting for that to finish before we move on contractors, we have already started doing that. The idea is to do the preliminary work for the contractors. So by the time the detailed design's done, we've got the contractors lined up to give us a quote on their detailed design. That obviously includes running it by yourselves as a council and also the user groups.
All right. Okay. All right. I'm happy to proceed on that basis. So where to from here?
Nigel has got a hand up.
Nigel, Councillor Belsham, should I say?
Thank you. I just read within the report that staff are asking elected members on a way forward for choosing the name of the building. Has that been decided upon, or are you asking that now?
Yeah, I wanted to flag 2 things with my report actually, and actually respond to the very beginning of the meeting where the mayor raised the question around who owned the land. So that was also an action from the last council meeting that we have had conversations with Graham Poynton about, and the land where the whole of the Taihape Memorial Park is actually Crown land and is owned by the Crown, but controlled and managed by the Rangitike District Council. So we are the managing organisation of the land, and therefore there's no other naming input needed from any donating former owners or something alike. And the other 2 things I wanted to ask was around the naming process. So we have received 3 actual suggestions for a name through the online and the paper-based responses. I have to check, to be honest, the Taihape responses. And currently, of course, there's no chance for these to be actually handwritten at the moment. So I'm happy to keep it open for a little bit longer. There's currently no urgency on this, but it would be good to know how the councillors want to review the name suggestions and how to shortlist them and how to go forward with selecting it.
Okay. So this is just an effect, an update report, and we've received it, so we can just move on.
Tina asked a question about naming. How?
I think the question, Councillor Belsham, you have another question, but
No, it's responding to the question within the report, and it is about how this council is going to make the decision on the naming of the building. And I don't know, but my suggestion would think that it would come from the user groups of the park and that building to perhaps make that decision on that name.
Subject to first of all finding out whether the land was gifted to us, or independent to that?
Sorry, I thought that had been answered by Adina, that it's Crown-owned land, but under management of RDC.
Sorry, I was busy trying to read through other information. All right. Are you wishing to put a motion to the effect of that the user groups will end up with making a decision on the name? Councillor Hira?
Aroha mai, this is a question to Adina, and you said that there's no urgency for the naming of the building. Is that correct?
Yes, at least not for the next 1 or 2 months.
Okay. Is it? Well, I'd like to. I would like to make some contacts outside with Ngāti Tama Kōpiri, who hold mana whenua over this area, and I'd like to be able to have some discussions with their people to see if they've actually got any contribution into it. But actually, I do not know whether or not there is any contribution from Ngāti Tama Kōpiri within it. Adina, would you know?
I don't think there is at the moment, no.
Okay, well, I'd just like to ask then, am I able to go away if there is a 1 or 2 months grace to be able to get some feedback from their representatives of that iwi?
Yeah, and I had also asked Laquan if he would be able to facilitate a meeting with the local iwi as well, because I wanted to see if there was further input potentially beyond of what we have already tried to put out, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd like to. I'm going to say I can put myself forward again to speak to a few of them, get them around a table, and just ask, have you got something? This is the request, and I know that Jill has actually spoken. Potentially, the Ngāti Tama may not have met as a group to be able to put that across the table, but I just want to acknowledge what you said, that the whenua at the end of the day has been Crown. It's Crown whenua. So the reality is, when it is Crown whenua, it's been taken from somewhere. So that's been taken as whenua that would have come directly from Ngāti Tama whānau people. So I just want to acknowledge that. So that was just in response to Andy when you had made when you'd spoken about potentially where did that, if there was somebody else that it might have been from that reserve had come from. So I just like to make sure that that's put out there as well. So if I'm able to be able to come back in a month or so, then that would be great.
Councillors, are we happy if this just gets recorded as an action that Councillor Hira engages with Ngāti Tama to Councillor Gordon?
Let's not forget that we have a community board up there that might want to be involved as well. So I think we just need to get all of the groups up there pointing in the right direction and get some feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe the action is we continue to search for a name. All right, look, councillors, I think we'll move on. Could somebody move that the Project Management Office report be received? Thank you to Councillor Duncan, Councillor Belsham. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. And now we move to, does somebody want to take us through anything there? Or can I go straight to 11.3? Are there questions that you want to raise around that report?
Is that the PMO report?
Yeah. So this is the project management report. This is where you get green arrows, red arrows, and brown arrows, and explanation marks, etc. Are there any questions that you want to raise with staff around this report?
We got Jess online.
Yes, hi,
Jess,
and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'm searching for questions around the report. I haven't had any indications. Councillor Hira.
Kia ora. I've just got one question, and it's around the remediation. It's number 6, the remediation of the historic landfill on Putarino Road.
Yeah.
And so in the kōrero, there's a now, and there's just a kōrero in there in the program where it says removal of the sheet pilings will still to be completed and planting of the willows will be done after that. I just want to, I just, having been involved with the removal of willows from Mōwhango River, quite a big section of Mōwhango River, I understand that you know, there's reasons of why the willows have been put there, fast growing, all the rest of it. But given that that it is actually a weed, what's the thinking behind that? Thank you.
Bishop, can I respond to that?
May go ahead.
So the reason for the willow planting, it was not included in our plan for the site. However, to satisfy the regional council about the stability of the bank once the sheet piling is removed, they have requested that willows be planted into the bank where it meets the river. We can't backfill the bank because of the winter weather. So for now, we'll be putting the willows in. I believe the regional council does want them to remain.
Thank you. It just blows my mind that one side tells you to do one thing, and having been for many years part of this whole the getting rid of willows out of rivers, that the regional council are doing that sort of thing. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if that's their directive, then that's what we're going to do. But it just kind of blows my mind that those things get put up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
With your agreement, Your Worship, I might be able to clarify this issue just a little bit. The willows that Councillor Hiro is referring to that were removed out of the Mōwhango River are crack willow, that's Salix fragilis, and the ones that the regional council now use for river stabilisation work are clones of Matsudana willow, and they're much smaller growing, and they're bred specifically for river management work. So they're not the big dinosaur monster things that get out of control in our creeks and rivers.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Hiro? I just ask, this wasn't a requirement as part of the negotiated process with Horizons. Who pays for this?
The Chief Executive and I are, well, the Chief Executive is going to write to Horizons to discuss that. We have incurred some quite significant additional costs to satisfy Horizons quite late in the piece. So these are in addition to the resource consent that was granted. So that conversation is ongoing.
I'd welcome that conversation because I think it's very unfair, and the Chief Executive I know is aware of this, and it's a process that's happening. I think we can just leave it there. Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you for the reports, Jess. Just around the comment that native trees will be planted in the spring or summer. I just, in my experience, I would have thought planting them now was a better option, that they get a bit established before summer comes, and yeah.
I think we're getting down into an operational level here, where we leave it with them, if that's fair.
Yeah.
I'll take the feedback though, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Any further comments around the project management reports? Questions? No? All right, we'll move on to 11.3. This is the annual report to the Alcohol and Regulatory Licensing Authority for the year ending 30th of June 2021. We have recommendations when we can scroll to them.
We actually have Gayleen and Rochelle online if there's any questions.
So we have Damien, Gayleen
and Rochelle if there's any questions.
All right, we have staff online if we need them, but I think this is pretty much a sort of just a regular happening one. Would somebody like to move that the report be received Councillor Carter, Councillor Hero. Those in favour? Thank you, carried. Are there any questions or possible further recommendations running from the report? I'll move on. Sorry, Galen, you've missed your moment in the sun here. Report to Council on the LGNZ Conference 2021 from Councillor Duncan. This is the Blenheim Conference. Councillor, are you prepared to accept that as a tabled report and take any questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Questions? In fact, first of all, can we receive it? Would you like to so move, Councillor Duncan, it's your report?
Yes.
Seconded by Councillor Dalgetty. Those in favour? Thank you, carried. Are you prepared to take any questions around your report? Questions from councillors, please. A couple of questions from me, councillor. As a councillor, your report indicates that you considered it worthwhile, but predominantly also in the networking area. Is that as I read it?
Yes, actually, probably right. I found that very valuable. It was very, it was quite intense, and there were lots of speakers, and there were lots of other things going on at the same time. I found actually in day 2, I suddenly realized I was missing out on other things that were also happening at the same time. So it did depend really what space you'd chosen as to what your experience would be. But the constant throughout the whole 3 days was it was incredibly valuable being there with mayors, CEs and fellow councillors and the quality, of course, of the speakers.
And you got a free roller coaster ride on the way home, I gather, your flight.
Yes, yeah, that was a bonus.
I should put this in context. This was right at the time the conference finished, right amongst the whole Blenheim floods and turbulent weather. So getting out of Blenheim was challenging for a lot of people. Right. Any further questions of Councillor Duncan with regards to Blenheim? No? I'll move on. Thank you. Can we scroll down, please? We now move into the minutes from committees. Would somebody like to move the recommendation that the following minutes are received? This is the Ratana Community Board, Sport New Zealand Rural Travel Fund, Te Rupe Ka Committee's meeting and Turakina Community Committee of the 5th of August 2021. Could we move those as a block? Councillor Ash, Councillor Belsham, those in favour? Those against? Carried. We'll move straight to the recommendations from, first of all, from Te Rupe Ka, that council approves or declines, and we've got to delete one of them, which I find strange. Below the recommendation from Te Rupe Ka, A, that Te Rupe Ka Committee recommends to Council that any surplus funds for marae water testing is directed towards any required water infrastructural remediation. Essentially, we have been given some governmental money to do some water testing on maraes, as I understand it, but I'll leave the Chief Executive to speak with regard to this. Peter.
I think on the project, best come from Jess, please, Your Worship.
Jess.
Yes, that is correct. We have initiated a project and started a project to stock take and test marae and Papakainga water and wastewater. That has commenced, and the marae in our district have been contacted about undertaking this work, and the response has been positive so far. And we will be working with a consultant who can accompany us and do surveys on the state of the infrastructure and do some testing of the water quality.
Look, I'll move from the chair that council approves the Te Rūpia Car recommendation to council that any surplus funds for Marae water testing is directed towards any required water infrastructural remediation. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Duncan seconding it. I don't think I need to go further in terms of explanation. Take questions. Councillor Belsham.
Yeah, just a question. So the requirement of the funds to be utilised for a specific purpose, this doesn't deviate from that purpose they were required for? Are they able to be utilised for this, is what I'm getting at?
Your Worship, is it okay if I provide some more information on the funding and what it covers?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the funding is for the stock take and inventory, and out of the funding that is there, we are able to use any that isn't used up for some minor upgrades at Marae and Papakainga. However, the intention is that the information is provided back to the Department of Internal Affairs, who is funding this, around the stock take of the water and wastewater. And it also opens the door for iwi groups to, with this Board of Council, prepare applications for funding for more significant upgrades that DIA will be reviewing.
Thank you. I think that answers your question, Councillor.
Yes.
Councillor Hira, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Hira.
Just to say that the money in question is the money that was part of that initial amount, and I think it was 4 million, something in that ballpark. So yeah, in the scheme of things, that 120,000 was the amount that we were told right at the beginning of when that money, when government had put that together, that would be going towards a contribution into those things within the Marae Papakainga space. So it's not taking away from anything. It was already, as far as I understand it, was already money that was earmarked in that area. So it's good to see that we've finally got, given that that we're finally getting some traction and able to get some movement in that space. So I think that that's very good.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
Yes, my question is really around how this project dovetails in with the moving feast that is Three Waters, because many of our Marae and Papakainga are not adjacent to our reticulated networks or not connected at all. And so where does it leave them in the bigger picture?
They will be caught up under the new water regulator. There is no doubt about this. This gives them some degree of understanding around where their network exists in terms of compliance. Look, I think I'll put this straight to a vote because I suspect everybody's going to be in support of this. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation, next one from the Ratana Community Board, that it approves or declines the below recommendation that the Ratana Community Board recommends to Council that Council gives consideration to the establishment of a discretionary fund for the Board's use, similar to the Small Projects Fund, but through a different rating mechanism, so the cost is not placed on Ratana ratepayers. So there's a discretionary fund for community committees, and that is rated from their community. So what they're wanting is the same thing, but not rated by their communities. Is that the explanation as I understand it from staff? Councillor Panapa.
Yeah, just to speak to this, that definitely was the intent of the community board. It was raised at the last meeting when I asked the question in terms of whether a fund was available to assist with the renovation of the council flats, the Kaumatua flats. I was asked by council staff to see whether there was an opportunity for a group to help with cleaning the flats. And so I asked the community board if there was a fund available to pay for cleaning stuff, and the response from staff was that there isn't a discretionary fund, and the chairman shared that he had learned at the recent community board conference that pretty much every other community board does have a discretionary fund. Now, Soraya, ex-councillor Soraya Pickett-Mason was the one that put forward the idea that it shouldn't be rated to the community. So that's why it's included within the request. But the ultimate request is that there is a discretionary fund for the community board to be able to carry out community initiatives within Ratana, and that's really the goal. However, council seeks to fund that is really up to council, but there's the added consideration of the recent rates increases as well that has impacted the community significantly. So they're just trying to figure out how can they still get the benefit of giving the community board some ability to serve the community without having to put extra cost on the community itself.
And they would be establishing a precedent in that position. Do they realise that?
I believe so. My personal preference is that we do not set a precedence, that it is along the lines that all other community boards, that there's not one rule for one and a different rule for others. But to be faithful to what they've asked for, just to give some context around the request, but ultimately it's to give them the freedom. How we choose to do that is, I think the council will do what is both socially and fiscally responsible.
All right. I'd prefer us to be speaking to a motion. I think somebody's got to be brave and either move that we do this or don't do it. Is somebody prepared to put a motion on the floor?
I'm happy to move a motion that a discretionary fund for the board's use be established. I don't know how to not add in the other part, because that's their request has been to not rate it on the community. But I would move a motion that that a discretionary fund definitely be established for the board.
I think that because the recommendation has come from Ratana Community Board, I think somebody is going to have to answer the question with regard to its rating. I don't think we can dodge that.
Okay.
Either that or it is a separate motion.
Sorry, Ash is just online. He's just asked, he said there's something a bit wrong with the interpretation. He just wants to butt in and give some context. He took the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you all heard that, but Ash is online. He took the minutes from the meeting and he would like to comment. And before it goes further, I'm happy for that to happen.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, it was discussed in that meeting that there was already a discretionary fund, a small projects fund for the Ratana Community Board that is set up, and that account already exists. It hasn't been used by the board at any point because they were aware of that rating mechanism. That was something we checked in with Michael Hodder pretty recently. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago that he provided that explanation, and that was brought up at the meeting. So their request is specifically for a discretionary fund that doesn't have that rating mechanism. If that's not on the table, then there's already a fund there that they can choose to use.
Some advice from staff as to how I handle this?
So I suggest that we can go away and have a look at this a bit further, and I might even talk to the chairman of the community board to seek a bit more information from him and come back to council next month with some more information.
Ms. Gordon is suggesting in effect that this lies on the table until the next meeting, where some options are looked at. I think the motion that you've put on the table at the moment, Warrie, the advice from Ash is that already exists. So I'm not sure that I could accept that motion because it's something that already exists.
I'm happy to rescind that motion and to go with leaving it on the table.
Would you be happy to move that this item lies on the table for further thought?
Absolutely. Yep, I'll move that.
Just lie on the table at full stop.
Yep.
So Councillor Parnapa is moving that this item be left to lie on the table. Have we a seconder to that? Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. I'm getting the feeling that we're all operating at the end of the final day sort of thing. So my apologies for that if my performance is dropping as well.
This is a second one. If I could just make a comment on this one as well. This was another request from the Ratana Community Board, and in the paper it wasn't clear. They wanted to include a clause in the renegotiation of the contract with the communal board, and it just mentioned opening hours, and it was opening hours of the toilets. So if council wants to accept that, we can just build that into any upcoming, into the review of the negotiation of the contract.
Yeah, how would we phrase that, Ms. Gordon?
I think we could accept their recommendation and just note that it will be included in the review of that contract.
So we'd just receive it in effect. I take that that advice. So the advice is that at this stage we would receive it, noting that it could be part of the negotiation process with council. Is that fair comment? So look, I'll move that we receive this on. Looking for a seconder too.
Yep.
Councillor Parnapa seconding that we receive, noting that. All in favour? Those against? Carried. Is there anything else I need to do at this stage in public? Peter, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I did, Your Worship. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to say so. However, whilst the minutes of the Turakina committee may be factually correct in terms of what was said, the content against me is factually incorrect. And I just wished for you and elected members to realise that, that I've offered to the committee to meet at other times and they've not accepted that.
Look, I'm prepared to, it is their report. I'm prepared to just put a note against that. So it's a note inside into our reception of those minutes. So we receive them noting that. Would that meet with your?
Yes, thank you.
Right, please, if we go to public excluded. So would like somebody please move that we go into a public excluded session at 4:25? Like 4:30 is fine. On the basis of this general subject matter to be considered, etc. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Belsham moving. Councillor Carter seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Can we just verify, please, that we're offline?
We've got a different Zoom link, so we all have to go off and go on the new Zoom.
Yeah, but can you just verify?